All right, welcome to this video on segment constructions, lesson 3 of our first unit of the year. I do have a link to a video on YouTube about copying a segment just made by some rando person, I don't know. There's written instructions here, but I'm going to go through it as best as I can using this little PDF annotator. I don't really have a compass tool on here, so I'm going to be sketching the arc marks that you will be making with your compass. But this will be still good reinforcement for what we learned in class. So the first thing I want to make sure you understand is that if you are going to construct something that is a copy of a segment, you want to start with a ray that is obviously longer than the segment you are copying. So just so you know that. So here, to construct a copy of this, I'm going to be constructing the length of PN. So I'm going to make a ray that is obviously longer than what I need. So here's the endpoint on my ray and the arrow. And then I'm going to open my compass to the length of PN. And then I'm going to measure that length onto my ray and make an arc. So my arc from my compass, I'm going to put my pointy side of my compass over here and my pencil side over here. And where it makes that arc is going to mark off that distance. Now, they didn't tell us what we have to name it, so I guess I'm just going to highlight this as being my length of PN, or I could label this as being the same distance as PN. And that's how you copy a segment. Now I'm going to do another construction, which is a slight variation on this one. We are going to construct 2 times the length of CD. Okay, so I'm going to open my compass to measure the length of CD. And then I'm going to come over here. I'm going to put my pointy part here and my compass arc I'm going to draw right there. Not easy to simulate on this laptop. All right, so that is 1 CD. I've marked off CD on there. Now I need to do it again. Put my pointy part here and mark off CD over here. So I will have added a CD onto a CD. And so since this is the length of CD and this is the length of CD, my entire length is twice what CD is. Don't ever go back and erase the extra segment, because that's what lets me know you did the construction and you didn't measure it perfect. All right, the third construction says to construct a segment, and this time it tells us it wants us to name it RS, and it has to be the length of CD plus the length of PN. So I'm going to measure CD and mark that off with my compass right here. So that's my length of CD. Then I'm going to measure PN with my compass. And I'm going to add that on with my pointy part here. And then my end point over here, that's the length of PN. And it tells us the entire segment must be named RS. So this is where R would be, and this is where S would be, adding both of those together. Now the final construction is a little bit more exciting. I'm going to make my ray. I have to construct PN minus CD. So first I will open my compass to the length of PN and mark that off on my ray with my pointy part here and my arc mark here. All right, that's the length of PN. But then it says we have to take CD away from that. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to open my compass to CD. Now I can do this starting here and come back and take off CD and make this my leftover part, or starting here, take it off of it this way and make this my answer part. It really doesn't matter which way. So I've measured PN. This whole part was PN. Now I've measured CD, and I'm going to go from the left and mark off the length of CD, which means this is PN minus CD. So that is the highlighted part of my final answer. So that's pretty much what you need to know about copying a segment. You can add, subtract, and multiply segments. The other construction is bisecting a segment, and I do have a link to a YouTube video. So what you do when you bisect a segment is you open your compass to more than halfway across the segment. So from A being one endpoint, I'm going to make an arc that goes more than halfway across. With that same compass opening, I'm going to switch my pointy part over to B and make another arc that goes more than halfway across. And then connecting those is where my perpendicular would go, straight through there. And it will divide it into two equal parts. Make sure you go more than halfway across, because if you don't go more than halfway across, what's going to happen is you're going to end up with two arcs that don't intersect. Or if you go exactly halfway across, the two arcs will only intersect at one point in the middle, and you need 2 points to make a line. So that's why you have to go more than halfway across. You do an equal arc from each endpoint, one from A and one from B, with B being where the pointy part is. There's really not a whole lot we can do with this except for divide stuff into other portions. So this example says to construct 1/4 of this segment. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to construct first half. To pick up, please. So I'm going more, sorry about the announcements, more than halfway across, and I'm making a half circle. That's from point, I guess we could call this A. From point B, and the same compass opening, I'm going to go more than halfway across. Then I can connect the two arcs, and now I have divided this into two equal segments. But it wants us to divide it in half again because we want to get a fourth. So if this point, let's call it C, I'm going to either divide CB in half over here or CA in half. It really doesn't matter. If they told us to divide it into 4 equal segments, then I would have to do both of them to get it fully divided. So I am going to open my compass to more than halfway across CB, and I'm going to make a half circle with my pointy part at C, half circle, and from my pointy part at B, half circle. These half circles would be much nicer if I was actually using a compass, but I can't on this piece of software. So I'm sketching it. So now I've divided that in half. And so these two are equal over here, which means I could say this is 1/4 of the whole thing, or I could say this is 1/4 of the whole thing, but we just need to highlight one set of 1/4. Okay. Next, it says, how many times would you have to do this construction to get 1/8 of the given segment? Well, to get 1/2 of the given segment, we do the construction once. 1/4, we had to do it twice. So for 1/8, we would have to do it 3 times because we then have to divide this remaining part right here in half to get an 8. So construct midpoints or perpendicular bisectors 3 times. Half of a half of a half is what we'd have to do. All right, so that is the end of this lesson on constructions involving segments, which are copy and bisect. You can now work on the assignment, and then our next lesson will have to do with angles.